An elderly woman quietly stepped out of her small suburban home, carrying nothing more suspicious than a shopping bag. Her gray hair, gentle smile, and calm demeanor made her look like any ordinary British grandmother enjoying retirement. Neighbors waved. She smiled back. No one could have imagined that this quiet old lady had spent decades helping one of Britain's greatest enemies. For over 40 years, she walked into the same office, typed the same reports, and returned home without attracting the slightest suspicion. She never carried a gun. She never stole stacks of classified documents. She never raced through dark alleys wearing a disguise. Yet intelligence experts would later discover that the information she secretly passed to the Soviet Union may have accelerated one of the most dangerous arms races in human history. The most shocking part? She wasn't motivated by money. She refused expensive gifts. She lived a modest life. And even after her secret was exposed, many people who knew her refused to believe she had ever been a spy. So how did an ordinary office secretary fool Britain's intelligence services for nearly 4 decades? How did a quiet grandmother become one of the Soviet Union's most valuable undercover agents? And why was she never sent to prison, despite admitting she had betrayed some of Britain's biggest secrets? To uncover the truth, we have to go back long before she became the grandmother the world saw. To a time when a young woman made a decision that would secretly change the course of the Cold War. Long before intelligence agencies gave her a code name, before secret files carried her name in red ink, she was simply Melita Norwood, born in 1912 in Bournemouth, England. To the outside world, she appeared to have an ordinary upbringing. But inside her home, politics wasn't just a topic of conversation, it shaped the way she viewed the world. Her father had fled Latvia after opposing the Russian Tsar, filling the house with discussions about inequality, revolution, and the struggle against powerful governments. As Europe moved toward political turmoil, Melita found herself increasingly drawn to left-wing ideals. She believed capitalism had failed millions of ordinary people and that socialism offered a fairer future. At first, these were simply beliefs. But history has a strange way of turning beliefs into dangerous decisions. By the 1930s, Europe stood on the edge of another devastating war. Fascism was spreading rapidly across Germany and Italy. Across the continent, thousands of young intellectuals believed the Soviet Union represented humanity's best hope against Adolf Hitler. Melita was one of them. She quietly joined circles connected to the British communist movement. To many of her friends, it wasn't treason. It was fighting for a better world. That conviction would soon place her directly in the path of Soviet intelligence. Around this time, she married Melita Norwood, a committed communist who shared many of her political beliefs. Their home became a meeting place where politics, ideology, and world affairs dominated conversations. Then came an opportunity that seemed completely ordinary. Melita accepted a secretarial position at the British Non-Ferrous Metals Research Association, an organization conducting highly sensitive scientific research for Britain's industrial and defense sectors. To everyone else, it looked like nothing more than office work. Typing reports, filing documents, answering correspondence. But hidden inside those reports were scientific breakthroughs linked to Britain's nuclear research program. Someone inside Moscow quickly realized the value of the quiet secretary sitting behind that desk. And before long, a Soviet handler made contact. The question wasn't whether she had access to Britain's secrets. The real question was whether she was willing to betray her own country for an ideology she believed was greater than national borders. Her answer would remain hidden. For nearly 40 years. The first meeting was brief.
No dramatic introductions.
No secret basement.
No coded handshake.
Just 2 people sitting in a public place, talking so casually that anyone walking past would have ignored them completely. The Soviet officer already knew almost everything about her. Her political beliefs. Her job. Her access. They only needed the answer to one question. Are you willing to help? She didn't hesitate. Unlike many famous spies, Melita wasn't blackmailed. She wasn't seduced. She wasn't promised millions of dollars. She believed she was helping create a safer world. That belief became the foundation of one of history's longest-running espionage operations. Soon, the meetings became routine. Sometimes in quiet parks. Sometimes inside ordinary cafes. Sometimes while walking through busy London streets. Every exchange looked painfully ordinary. Which was exactly the point. Instead of stealing entire files, Melita worked differently. She memorized technical details. She quietly copied scientific reports. Whenever she could, she passed carefully selected information to her Soviet handlers. Every document looked harmless on its own. But together, they painted an increasingly clear picture of Britain's scientific progress. Then history changed everything. World War II erupted. Britain poured enormous resources into developing revolutionary military technologies. Among the country's most closely guarded secrets was a project connected to atomic research. Only a tiny number of scientists understood its true significance. Even fewer people realized that an office secretary was quietly watching information flow through her department. Because of her position, Melita wasn't building the bomb. She wasn't designing reactors. She wasn't conducting experiments. But she had something equally valuable: access. She knew which reports mattered. She knew who was working on what. She knew which scientific breakthroughs were changing the future. Those pieces of information slowly made their way east. Soviet intelligence officers considered her one of their most reliable sources. She almost never attracted attention. She asked very few questions. She remained calm, predictable, invisible. And that invisibility became her greatest weapon. As the years passed, British security services focused on diplomats, military officers, and famous scientists. No one thought to investigate the quiet woman typing reports behind a desk. While governments hunted dangerous spies, one of the most valuable Soviet agents was making tea for co-workers during lunch breaks. But someone somewhere would eventually begin asking a simple question. How was Moscow learning Britain's scientific secrets so quickly? And once investigators started following that trail, it would lead closer to Melita than anyone could have imagined. For years, the flow of information continued almost uninterrupted. Governments changed. Prime ministers came and went. The Second World War ended. The Cold War began. Yet Melita Norwood remained exactly where she had always been, behind the same desk, living the same quiet life. That was the brilliance of her cover. She never lived like a Hollywood spy. She didn't own luxury cars. She didn't suddenly become wealthy. She wore simple clothes, traveled by public transport, and returned each evening to the same modest home she shared with her husband. To everyone around her, she was completely forgettable. And perhaps that was the greatest disguise of all. Meanwhile, across Europe, a silent battle was unfolding. The United States and Britain were racing to maintain their technological advantage. The Soviet Union was desperately trying to catch up. Every scientific breakthrough mattered. Every classified report could save years of research. According to intelligence historians, information supplied by Soviet agents, including Melita and others operating inside Britain and the United States, helped Moscow dramatically shorten the time needed to develop its own nuclear weapons. She wasn't the only spy involved, but she was considered one of the most consistent and dependable. Her Soviet handlers admired one thing above all else. She almost never made mistakes. She rarely missed a meeting. She never demanded money. She never complained. One former KGB officer would later describe sources like her as priceless because they were motivated by conviction rather than greed. That made them incredibly difficult to detect. Years turned into decades. British counterintelligence arrested several Soviet spies. Networks collapsed. Double agents were exposed. Interrogations filled newspaper headlines. Each arrest sent waves of panic through Moscow. Handlers disappeared overnight. Secret communication methods changed. Many agents were ordered to stop working completely. But somehow, Melita remained untouched. Every investigation seemed to pass right by her. It was almost unbelievable. How could one woman escape suspicion while entire espionage networks were falling apart around her? The answer lay in something investigators failed to appreciate. They were searching for spies who behaved like spies. People living beyond their salaries. People taking unnecessary risks. People with suspicious lifestyles. Melita fit none of those profiles. She lived so modestly that even if someone had examined her finances, they would have found almost nothing unusual. She accepted only small payments from her Soviet contacts, sometimes refusing them altogether. She believed she wasn't selling secrets. She believed she was serving humanity. That belief never changed. Even as Britain and the Soviet Union became bitter enemies. Even as the threat of nuclear war terrified the world. Even as generations grew older. Her secret life continued. But every perfect operation eventually faces one problem. Time. And after almost 40 years of silence, one unexpected event inside the Soviet Union would trigger a chain reaction that threatened to expose secrets hidden for decades. A storm was coming. And for the first time in her extraordinary double life, Melita Norwood was about to learn that even the quietest spy cannot stay invisible forever. The collapse didn't begin in Britain. It began thousands of miles away. In 1991, the Soviet Union, the nation Melita Norwood had secretly served for decades, simply ceased to exist. For intelligence agencies around the world, it was an unprecedented opportunity. Former KGB officers began defecting. Secret archives slowly opened. Old files that had been buried for decades started resurfacing. Names once protected by Moscow's intelligence services were suddenly no longer guaranteed to remain secret. Then came one of the biggest blows. A senior KGB archivist, Vasily Mitrokhin, secretly copied thousands of classified intelligence files before defecting to Britain. Hidden inside those archives were the identities of numerous Soviet agents who had operated across the West for decades. One name stunned British intelligence. Melita Norwood. Investigators began comparing the old intelligence files with her life. The dates matched. The meetings matched. Her employment matched. The picture became impossible to ignore. In 1999, British newspapers broke the story. The quiet retired grandmother living in suburban England was suddenly on the front pages around the world. Reporters crowded outside her modest home. Television cameras waited at her front gate. Neighbors stood in disbelief. Many simply refused to believe it. The woman they had known for years as a kind, polite pensioner was now being described as one of the Soviet Union's longest-serving British agents. When journalists finally asked her about the accusations, she didn't react with panic. She didn't run. She didn't deny everything. Instead, she remained remarkably calm. She acknowledged that she had passed information to the Soviet Union because she genuinely believed she was helping maintain a balance of power and prevent one nation from dominating the world. It was an explanation that divided public opinion. Some viewed her as a committed ideologue who had betrayed her country. Others saw an elderly woman who had acted according to deeply held political beliefs, however controversial they were. The biggest surprise came next. Despite the extraordinary allegations, British authorities decided not to prosecute her. By then, she was in her late 80s. Much of the evidence was decades old, and prosecutors concluded that a trial was not in the public interest. She would never stand in a courtroom. She would never serve a prison sentence. After nearly 40 years of secretly working for Soviet intelligence, she simply continued living out the remainder of her life as a free woman. Melita Norwood died in 2005 at the age of 93. To some, she will always be remembered as a traitor who compromised Britain's secrets. To others, she was an idealist who believed she was working to prevent global conflict during one of history's most dangerous eras. But regardless of how history judges her, one fact is beyond dispute. For decades, one of the Soviet Union's most valuable British sources wasn't hiding in the shadows with fake identities or high-speed chases. She was sitting quietly behind an office desk. Invisible. Patient. Ordinary. And perhaps that's the most unsettling lesson of all. The most dangerous spies are rarely the ones who look dangerous. Sometimes, they're the ones no one ever thinks to suspect. Some stories deserve to be remembered because they reveal the hidden side of history. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to her Silent Strength for more incredible true stories of fearless women, legendary spies, hidden heroes, and history's most extraordinary untold stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.